Hello, and welcome back to the channel, everybody. As of the day that I am recording this, October the 30th, but y'all will be seeing this video the next day, on the 31st. So in that context, happy Halloween, everyone. I hope y'all are having the most wonderful time of the year, because I know that I am. Now, quick disclaimer. I mentioned that this little series that I was going to do was going to consist of 3 parts. Ranking the Jack-o'-lantern openings, which I've already done, followed by a ranking of all the Halloween soundtracks. Then, the ranking that you are about to watch. But, I came to the realization that there's no way that I would be able to do the soundtrack video in a way that wouldn't be heavily copyright striked. Hell, I was barely able to get my Jack-o'-lantern ranking up and not be copyrighted to death with the little bits of Halloween music that I had in that video. And I realized that to do my soundtrack ranking would require me to point out all the various standouts that I like from each of the soundtracks. To include that much music in a video, the video would get dinged to death, and as much as I would be trying to put a lot of labor and love into it for you guys, there's no way I would be able to get the video up there without being blocked. So I sadly had to scrap the soundtrack ranking and go right into the main event with ranking all the movies. I am sorry to anyone who may have been excited for the soundtrack ranking, but if you want to know just in general what my worst soundtrack would be and what my favorite soundtrack would be, my worst soundtrack of the entire franchise is the theatrical cut of Halloween 6, and my overall favorite score soundtrack of the franchise is from 2018. So now that that's out of the way, let's get into it. Now, going into the main event, ranking the Halloween films. Now, if you watch my channel and you're subscribed, you're probably wondering, Zach, you already did a huge, massive live stream ranking all the films worst to best. Yes, I did. And while that stream is not negated, or that I think it is worthless now, because I actually had a hell of a time doing that, I did want to do a sort of 1 year later kind of thing in regards to Halloween Ends, with the OG storyline reaching its close. I did rank the films, like, right off the bat. That is something I wanted to do, content for the channel. But I knew that deep down I was going to revisit this franchise one last time, or at least until the next reboot comes out, but one last time for the time being to definitively rank these movies, because I wanted to let these movies sit, or at least with how the new trilogy wraps up, I wanted to let that all sit and marinate and see how it works with me a year later. And just overall see if any of my picks of my previous ranking would change. And I will admit, rewatching all of them again over the last couple of days, some of my spots have changed. No drastic changes, especially with my bottom 3. But there are some changes here, so that also, I guess, gives merit to doing my now definitive ranking of all the films in the series. Now, even though, over half of the films in the series aren't even canon anymore, way over half of them, that doesn't change the fact that this is still a franchise I love very much, and I hold it near and dear to my heart. This is my favorite horror franchise of all time. Michael Myers is my favorite figure in horror, which, if you've seen all my content about it on this channel, I guess that's fucking obvious by now, but I digress. Comment down below how you would rank all the films in the series worst to best, be civil, and let's have a fun discussion. So, let's get started. Now, coming in last place, I think most fans could agree, mostly, and that is going to be Halloween Resurrection. Now, guys, much like the original, with it all being like, what else can you possibly say with how much of a masterpiece that film is? I think pretty much the same thing applies here for this pile of shit. What else can be said? But I'm gonna say it anyway. Just simply by existing, the fact that this is a film that was made, everything about Halloween H2O is destroyed. Laurie Strode's character arc, destroyed. Her emotional closure at the end of the film, finally defeating Michael, finally defeating her brother, or at least what was for that timeline, destroyed. Any chance of the series finally having some closure and a concrete ending, destroyed. Yeah. Everything this film touches in regards to the franchise, it destroys. Michael Myers is emasculated worse than any of the other films in the franchise, in my opinion, and that is saying something. I'm looking at you, producer's cut of Halloween 6. But going into some stuff I honestly enjoy about this film on like a guilty pleasure sense. Look, he's not a good character in this, but I love Busta Rhymes in this. Like, for what it's worth, I guess, it's like he's having a ball and trying to make it work, with what he has. And honestly, he's enjoyable. It's not good, but you know what? I gotta enjoy something in this movie. And honestly, going into some actual things I do like in this movie, because there are some things, there are actually some neat shots of Michael in the darkness when he's chasing some victims around, like especially when he goes around chasing that one chick down through those little old catacomb areas, whatever that is, and then he impales her on the metal spike thing. Michael, when in the darkness, he actually looks pretty intimidating. The mask overall doesn't look good, especially when you see it fully lit up and stuff, and you see it in full view. But there's some moments, like in the darkness, and the way he's lit in the darkness, that he looks pretty good. And then, of course, there's some decent kills in this, some decent chase sequences. But my biggest positive for the film, and this is actually something pretty substantial, the main Halloween theme for this is actually pretty good. In fact, I would actually say it is one of the best versions of the Halloween theme in the entire franchise. I love the eerie orchestral vibe that it gives off, For a film that is otherwise as generic and low-hanging fruit as you could possibly get, the theme is honestly much better than the film itself deserves. So, there you go. But none of that is enough to save the pile of shit that this film is. It's the worst film in the franchise. It's one of the worst sequels ever made. So, what else can be said? Halloween Resurrection. May you never, ever rest in peace. And at number 12 is honestly not much better. Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. Oh man, you know that a film is a mess when it has two completely separate, different cuts, and neither of them feel complete, or all that coherent, or even all that satisfying. Oh, where do I begin? Honestly, either version of this film that you watch is messy, sloppy, and disappointing. The way that they do in frickin' Jamie Lloyd's character arc and how they wrap that all up, yeah, loosely wrap it up, if you could even call it that, in this film, either way is unsatisfying. Brutally impaling her on farm equipment in the opening act, or having her live and survive halfway through the film just to be shot in the head by what's his name? The Man in Black? No. No, thank you. And then, of course, you have what is honestly one of the worst things you could ever do in a Halloween film. Something that a Halloween film should never do. Explain Michael's motivations. Look, it was controversial enough when they gave him this whole familicide motivation in Halloween 2. He has to go after his sister. And then they just add further onto it by saying, oh, now he does it because he's controlled by a cult. And it's this curse that's passed on down from generation to generation. And the person has to wipe out their entire bloodline to avoid some curse or some stupid shit. Ugh, it's messy. So yeah, you got all that horse shit. And then you have some of the most boring, bland, generic characters in the entire franchise. The Strode relatives that live in the Michael Myers house are not likable whatsoever. I wanted these people to die in a blazing inferno, especially the father, which he technically does, so kudos. And then going back to how both cuts are very sloppy. Like I said, either version you watch, you don't get a satisfying ending. In fact, can you even call it an ending? It feels like either cut you watch, it feels like more was supposed to keep happening, but then it just stops. So, going into what works about that, because I do want to do that for each of these movies, even the ones that I don't like. I will give credit to some things that I do like. Dr. Loomis is the biggest positive in this, which I guess it's like no shit. You know, he's like, for some, the best character in the franchise. But especially how friggin' Halloween 5 went all Last Jedi on him, making him a psychopath and just all out of character. It was nice to see him feel more like himself in this movie. Even if he's not in it that much, unless you watch the producer's cut, which I'll get to that in a second. But you at least had one last film with Loomis being the badass motherfucker that he is, not some psychopath who will freaking use someone as bait to catch Michael. Get that shit the hell out of here. So, even if it was his last movie, he at least went out on a kick-ass note, you know, or at least being portrayed as the hero that he actually is. And then the kills are actually pretty good. Michael Myers is honestly a badass in this, even if I don't like how the mask looks in this one. That's kind of a trend with a lot of these Halloween sequels. They never get the mask right, but I'll get into that later. And Tommy Doyle, who makes his return in this film, played by Paul Rudd, which this is actually his first movie, I honestly think at least story-wise he's okay in this, even though it does bring up the question if he's been all obsessed with Michael like this for all of his life up to this point, at least per this timeline, then it argues the question, where the fuck was he in 4 and in 5? But I digress. Aside from the acting, which honestly is pretty dog shit, which I'm not even going to blame that on Paul Rudd, because if I was handed a script like this, you know, not that I wouldn't try to make it work as an actor, but what actor could try to make it work? And, but like I said, story-wise, I actually think he's okay in this, you know, the idea of bringing in other characters into the loop to want to go up against Michael Myers. Even if there's a film in my top 3 that I think uses this idea much better and does this particular character much more justice. Oh, and don't worry, we will get to that awesomeness soon. Wink, wink. Now, talking a bit more in detail about both cuts for a minute. If I had to choose which cut I prefer, which I know in this case is just merely picking your poison, but I honestly prefer the theatrical cut only for one reason, which I will get into when I talk about the producer's cut. Now look, the theatrical cut, as far as editing, is the messier version. With all those freaking flash epileptic shots that they have go through there, and the freaking all the stuff that was cut, which some stuff I understand cutting, like really understand, and then some other stuff I feel like, why the fuck would you cut this? Like I said, these movies are both a mess. But yeah. But what does it for me with the theatrical cut is that it has the better ending. Now, getting into why, I will have to talk about the producer's cut, which honestly, I was actually enjoying the producer's cut a lot more. I was appreciating that the editing was a lot smoother and more coherent. I appreciated that the score felt more like Halloween, none of that techno rock and roll shit. Like honestly, like I said about the soundtracks, the soundtrack for the theatrical cut is the worst soundtrack in the entire franchise, in my opinion. But like I said, I was enjoying how the producer's cut was edited better, and the soundtrack was better, and I was even appreciating that Loomis had more screen time. Yeah, you still have the same problems, just with the bare bones being the same story, but I was enjoying this version more. Up until the ending. With all the devil cult shit, which is just way too fucking out there for something like Halloween. Like all the subtlety that was there, that was established in the original, it's just fucking gone. And need I mention that Michael rapes and impregnates his 15-year-old niece. What the fuck, Dimension? What the fuck is this? Are you kidding me with this shit? I literally have no words, so I'm just gonna move on. So yeah, you have all that, and then you have a freaking generic as hell chase scene at the end with them trying to escape the cult, and then Michael gets stopped by fucking rocks, which, as if they haven't emasculated him enough in these later sequels. So, but yeah, overall a better edited and scored movie. It's a more coherent version overall, but it just has the worst ending. Now, why I overall prefer the theatrical cut more is because it has the better ending. It's not good, but they at least try to cut out all the devil cult shit and the frickin' thing about Michael raping his niece to try to make it look like, oh, the baby is some kind of genetic creation. It's stupid, but you know what? At least they tried to salvage something, so I'll give them that. And it's just, I honestly did like the scene between Michael and Tommy in this. The way that he's all stuttering, you can tell that he's scared. That he's scared shitless of confronting his childhood tormentor. Like this man who's been tormenting him for at least the past 10 years or so, or I'm assuming is 10 years. All that's fine enough. Again, even though there's a film in my top 3 that utilizes Tommy Doyle and other returning characters a lot better. Wink. But even then, like I said, you can't win with either version. The way they send off Loomis in this is just fucking disrespectful either way. The producer's cut is worse with how they hint at the fact that he's going to be Michael's new guardian and lead the Cult of Thorns or whatever that stupid shit is. So, yeah, this movie's a fucking mess. As much as I like the fact that Loomis feels more like himself again, I'm then reminded of the fact that the way they do him in at the ending, and then my heart fucking sinks. So, I've rambled on long enough about this one in particular. I know this movie has its passionate fans, like really hardcore passionate fans, and like any film in this franchise, if you enjoy this one, enjoy it to your heart's content. I genuinely mean that. If you get something out of this, as weird as some of the elements in this film that I think they are, but I digress. If you like this film, enjoy it to your heart's content, and just comment below why you enjoy these certain ones. So that is at number 12. At number 11 is a film that I weirdly enough have an odd sense of nostalgia for, but obviously this film hasn't held up at all, and that is going to be Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers. Now, as I just mentioned, yes, this is one of the ones that I oddly enough have a sense of nostalgia for, but only because when I was younger, we had a select few Halloween films on DVD, this being one of them. So by those unfair semantics, this is one of the Halloween films I watched most at a younger age. But that sense of nostalgia aside, this film doesn't work at all. By bringing Michael back, you negate the ending of Halloween 4. With the evil being passed to Jamie. Michael was dead, but his evil was passed on. That was a fantastic idea to go for if you want to do a sequel. But nope. We gotta keep giving fans the Michael boners, otherwise they'll start bitching again. Because Lord forbid they do something different. Although the film in my number 4 spot does rectify that, so wink. But going into this film, this is what I call the Last Jedi of the Halloween films. Why? Getting right into my biggest negative, the way that they write and portray Dr. Loomis's character in here is dog shit. And you're probably thinking, oh, Zach, how dare you question the man himself, Donald Pleasance. He loves playing this character. Well, guess what? He hated how they did him in Halloween 5 also. He went on record calling it rubbish, was the specific word he used. So I'm sorry, but I'm with Donald Pleasance on this one. I hate it as much as he does. This is not Loomis. A lot of the things that he does in this film, Loomis would never do. We know the character enough to this point to know what his deal is. Yeah, he's sort of crazy, and he has this obsession, but damn it, he would give his life for a town full of people that quite literally hate him, as we saw in Halloween 4. So, but nope, they throw it all out the window in favor of him literally tormenting Jamie for information on Michael. And then at the end, you have him using Jamie as bait to catch Michael. What the fuck? That's enough said. Now going into just the rest of the film, this is just the most dull, lightweight, boring film in the entire franchise. It may be at number 11 above some of the other ones, but simply put, there are certain things that Halloween 6 and Resurrection I think there are worse sins that they commit. They may not be as boring as this one, but they commit worse sins, if that makes sense. So, yeah, the kills are a joke. Michael is a joke. The mask looks nothing like Michael Myers. Like nothing whatsoever. And, yeah. And now, let's talk about the big elephant in the room. I actually have an interesting opinion on Tina. I actually did not mind her for the bulk of the runtime of this film. I mean, yeah, you could say she was annoying and obnoxious, but I didn't necessarily find her unlikable, or at least not yet. Because you know what, I mean, yeah, she was annoying and she was obnoxious, but whatever, you know. Horny teenager, you know. What horny teenagers in these slasher films aren't obnoxious? So, but it wasn't up until the point where she's having that tender little moment with Jamie, where she just leaves her in her room crying for her when all she's trying to do, Tina, is protect you from her psychopathic uncle. That point, you know the scene, is where I was like, yeah, fuck this bitch. Any sort of likability, question mark, I may have had for her was thrown out the window by that point. So, but then again, she dies, so I guess it all evens out. And then, of course, what else can I point out? The Myers house looks nothing like how it's supposed to. And then you have all this Man in Black shit that the writers of this film had no intention of following up on with another film because they didn't want to come back because they don't like these movies. So what the fuck? So, honestly, yeah, I've said all I can say about this film. It may not be the worst film in the series, but make no mistake, Halloween 5 is the most dull and boring of the entire franchise. And by this point, it is what was only the beginning of the stooping quality. So, thanks, Dominic, Uthen, and Gerard. Yo, you're a delight. Now, it is worth noting that it's pretty much just these bottom three are the ones that I would go fully negative on. Like, these are the ones that I hate, I don't like them, and if I were to ever rewatch any of them again, it would only be if I'm in, like, the hardcore binging mood, like I'm feeling like I actually want to watch every single one of the Halloween films. So other than that, yeah, these bottom three are the piles of shit of the series in my opinion. So from number 10 onward are the ones that I would say I enjoy overall. Number 10 and number 9 are the ones that would rank more in the okay segment of the ranking. They have major flaws, major issues, but they both balance out enough to where I think they're okay. So with that being said, my number 10 is going to be Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. Now, getting my negatives out of the way just right off the bat so I can get into what I think does work about the film. The over-reliance on gore, I honestly feels the most gratuitous in this film. And I guess you could pretty much say that about both of these Rob Zombie installments, is that the gore feels at its most gratuitous here. There's some moments where the shock value works and I'm entertained by it, but there are other moments where I feel it's just overly mean-spirited. And I guess you could say that about the tone of the film overall, is that it's very mean-spirited, especially if you watch, like, the extended director's cut, which is almost 2 hours long. But, yeah, in that cut, Laurie Strode is just... she's traumatized and she's trying to work through what happened in the previous film, but they dial it too high with how overly reactionary she's being, and it's to the point where she's treating the people that took her in like shit. Like, her parents were killed, she had nowhere to go, and Annie and her father were kind enough to take her in, and she just treats her best friend like shit. Like, I get that that's how some people would be like, when with trauma and all that, you'll just lash out, and you're just so broken as a person. I get that, but there can be a balance, and that's why I prefer the theatrical cut of this movie. It's not perfect by any means, but a lot of those extra scenes of her being overly bitchy are gone, and they mellow her out just enough in the theater cut, so it's a much better version. And honestly, this has got to be down there with Halloween 5 as one of, if not maybe the worst usage of the Dr. Loomis character I have ever seen. He does not even feel like Loomis in this, outside of the name. With this overtly diva-type personality he has. No, that's old Loomis. This is new. Huh? And then just you're writing the book, which puts all that sensitive information out there about Lori being Michael's sister, and just having this overtly greedy personality to the point that it just skews his character to the point where at the end, when he comes in to help, I was honestly questioning, are you here to help, or are you just here looking for material for another book? That's how bad it got. But going into what works about the film, the overall atmosphere that Rob Zombie creates here, as well as some of the ideas, just having the balls to go as batshit as he did, and willing to do something so overtly different, at least by this point in the franchise. Kudos to him for at least wanting and being willing to do something different. Not all of it works, but you know what? The shackles are off with him. The restraints of him having to do the remake with the first film. Now with this sequel, he can just let loose and do whatever he wants. While I may not like everything he does, just the willingness and the fact that he was wanting to do something different instead of just rehash some of the same shit was commendable. So, oh yeah, like another one of my biggest positives, I almost forgot to mention, is Annie and Brackett. They're the most likable characters in the movie. And especially that one scene alone, with Brackett breaking down over the death of his daughter. That is honestly, genuinely heartbreaking, and the acting from Brad Dourif is great. And honestly, this is a scene that I feel like gets left out of the loop because of the rest of the stuff that the rest of the fans always bitch about. So yeah, kudos to Rob Zombie, Say what you want about him as a writer, but under the right circumstances, he can deliver some great scenes in his movies. If there's one thing I'm honestly mixed on is the ending. Because then they start bringing in all that ghost horse bullshit, which honestly is another negative for me with this film. And they leave it overtly ambiguous whether or not Lori and Loomis and them all actually die. And that final scene with Lori in that big white room, I'm just like, I'm down for ambiguous, but then sometimes there's a point where it just gets too confusing. And there are times where I watch this movie where I feel like it leans more towards confusing. Like they were too lazy in the writing department to actually explain what's going on and just try to rely on the fact that, oh, it's this weird, ambiguous, trippy visual, so let's leave it on that and leave audiences to ponder. And some of it works, some of it doesn't, and I guess that's this movie in a nutshell. Some of it works, some of it doesn't. I'd say it's pretty even with what I like and what I don't like. Like I said, this is an okay movie. But honestly, that's why it's this low on the list, because the stuff that doesn't work about it is really, really bad with the dialogue. And again, going back to the overuse of gore and the misuse of Loomis. So, yeah, it's a tricky movie. But it's watchable enough for me because of the stuff I like, so it lands safely, confidently here at number 10. Coming in at number 9 is this film's predecessor, actually. Rob Zombie's Halloween, the 2007 remake. Now, much like the sequel that would eventually follow to this film, I think that this film also it's fine. It's okay. In fact, I lean more mixed positive to this film, whereas with the sequel, I'm more overall mixed. But this one, there's some stuff I like in it and that I want to defend. It's not perfect, mind you, given its spot on the list, but there's some stuff in here that I think, honest to God, really works here. Now, something that I honestly like in context of this film, it being a remake, it's separate from the actual main continuity and timeline, is while I get to an extent why fans are pissed that once again they give a human motivation to Michael Myers and they really, really humanize him in this one, I don't mind it so much here in the remake because it's a remake. It's separate from the other continuity. So, and to your credit, if this was the motivation for Michael's madness in the actual continuity in the original films, it would piss me off. But here, okay, in context, you want to do a remake, you want to give it its own flavor, do something different, and so I don't mind the idea. And the other concept they go for with meshing all the stuff from Halloween 2 with all the familicide motivation, wanting to go after his sister, and just making that his core and his motivation right from the very beginning. I think mixing all that with elements from both of the original 2 films was smart. And the acting overall, I think, is really good. The dialogue's another story, but we'll get to that in a minute. And the casting, I'm overall really a big fan of too. Scout Taylor Compton, I think, she does a very good job as Laurie Strode. She really makes it her own and doesn't try to copy Jamie Lee Curtis. Same with Malcolm McDowell, who I think was a perfect choice to recast Loomis. Like, if anybody to recast Loomis, which is a tall order given the shoes that Donald Pleasance left to fill, I think Malcolm McDowell does an excellent job here. And I also like how he's characterized here too. Yes, there's an element of him writing a book, but in this film it doesn't come off so much as he's fame hungry or just doing it for the money. It honestly feels like, it's part of his studies, So I don't even mind that aspect either. And then Tyler Mane is a chilling Michael Myers. Like, I would not want to run into this motherfucker in an alley. But then again, who would want to? And I thought it was a very cute little Easter egg, or I guess it was more than an Easter egg, but I thought it was a very cute choice to bring Danielle Harris back to the franchise and cast her as one of the OG characters. She does a very good job as Annie. In fact, I'd say I maybe like this version of Annie more. Don't kill me. But yeah, there is a lot of stuff that works on this, and I think one of the things that works best is Sherry Moon Zombie. For as much flack as she usually gets as an actress, not just for the fact that Rob Zombie always casts her in all his movies, but I actually think her performance is genuinely really good here. And I'm sorry, I will totally back you guys any day of the week for how much white trash that Michael's family is with Ronnie, and even how they portray Judith Myers in this. But I never really got that out of Michael's mother in this. Yeah, she has a job as a stripper, but she doesn't come off all slutty or white trash or anything. She comes off as like a genuinely loving, responsible mother who's just simply in a bad situation. And I felt really sorry for her, like, towards the middle of the film when she opts herself out of depression over seeing her son go down this downward spiral. It was some heartbreaking shit, and I really liked her in this. So yeah, bravo. I think this is the best performance that Sherry Moon Zombie has given in all the movies she's been in. But now going into the negatives. For as I've said earlier that there's a lot of stuff that I like as far as how they humanize Michael Myers, and that in this context, I actually don't mind it, and I stand by that. But what doesn't work about it is the fucking dialogue. And the opening, like, 20 or so minutes with showing Michael and his family is honestly really hard to get through. Aside from the stuff with Sherry Moon Zombie, which I did say was really good, it is really painful hearing a lot of this crass white trash dialogue. But honestly, it's just a small quarter of the movie, with the white trash stuff. Because once that's out of the way and Michael kills his family and all that, then the film honestly gets a lot better from there, even if the dialogue overall is still a problem. And the overall sexually violent overtone that this film brings, especially if you watch the fucking, extended director's cut of this film, which changes Michael's escape scene for some reason. We go from, in the theater cut, which was honestly a pretty badass escape scene for Michael. Okay, it's basic, nothing overly elaborate. He just breaks free from his chain, slaughters the guards and all that, and he gets away. But, the way it's shot, the way that's shown, it's badass. But in the extended cut, they had to completely switch and replace that scene with a fucking rape scene. Like, the two guards, apparently drunk, take some new female inmate in there and try to rape her in Michael's room. In the room of a 7-foot-tall maniac who they know that if given the chance to, will bash your fucking skulls in. And that's what fucking happens. So yeah, that's where the mixed aspect of it comes in for me, because if the stuff that I liked about this movie carried through the overall script and narrative, and the rest of the film was as strong in the dialogue department and the execution of some of the scenes, I would honestly say this is one of the best horror remakes of all time. There's no way that would ever be better than the original, but it could have been, but it's a good remake that could have been great. So, yeah. That's the bulk of it for me. is pretty much that. There is that I did want to defend all that because I do think that there's more good in this film than I think people are willing to point out. They just go straight to the bad dialogue and the white trash stuff, which, yeah, that shit is bad. But there's some good shit in this that I think needs to start being given more credit. And plus, come on. You cast Brad Dourif in this as one of the best characters in the series, Sheriff Brackett. That's another okay in my book, so yeah. This is a good remake that, while not great, the good stuff in it I really do like, and it's enough for me to give it an overall recommendation, and it sits safely here at number 9. Oh, ho, ho, ho. And number 8 is getting us into the really good shit with Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. Now, I, like a lot of people, wrote this movie off for the longest time just because, Michael Myers wasn't in it. But ever since 2018, when I first gave this film a watch, I've been kicking myself in the ass ever since. Because it honestly would have been one of my favorite horror films growing up. Like, right off the bat, Conal Cochran as a villain is one of, well, not just one of my favorite horror villains, but just one of my favorite movie villains of all time, period. So not only can you tell just by the performance alone that he's like having the time of his life playing this role, but his plan, what he wants to do, the whole concept of this movie of going back to the dark roots of Halloween with the rituals and the sacrifices and the festival of Samhain. Samhain, not Samhain, mind you. I think that's an ingenious concept. And then you have the whole little silver shamrock little jingle, which is just an ear sore, but in the best of ways. And then, of course, the 3 main Halloween masks that we see with the pumpkin and the witch and the skeleton. Those are iconic images. And going into more the mixed aspect is that while our 2 main characters they're fine enough. Like, they're fine enough to follow through these 90 minutes. They're not the most developed characters in the world, just to put it kindly. But they work fine enough as is, and you have the rest of the stuff in the movie that makes up for it. And going into the ending alone is another example of an open, ambiguous ending that works every bit as well as the original John Carpenter masterpiece. Chef's kiss. Mwah. Brilliant. I love when movies end on dark notes. When it calls for it. Because with some movies you can tell when a movie has a dark ending that just it can ruin the film, or in this case really help the film. So it's very tricky to tread that balance. And I think this movie treads it very well, so even though it took me a long-ass time as a Halloween fan to come around to it, I do like Halloween 3 a lot. And it is one of my more well-regarded entries in the franchise at number 8. We're now at the point in the list from here at number 7 onward. These are all like A movies for me. A minus, A plus. Like, number 7 onward are my favorites of the franchise. And they would all rank among my favorite horror films of all time, if I'm being quite frank. So, keep that in mind with the list going forward. And coming in at number 7 is going to be the original sequel, Halloween 2. Now, this is a film that, growing up with it, this is one of the ones that I loved watching the most. In fact, it was one of my favorites right next to the original, if not top 3 at best. But as you can tell, it's dipped quite a bit in my list. I still love it a lot. Like I said, from here onward, these are all my favorites of the franchise. But there are some things that have aged a bit poorly for me. Starting off with one of the things, if you saw my ranking of the Jack-O-Lantern opening credits, you know that while I don't hate it in any way at all, there are things about the Jack-O-Lantern credit sequence in that film that I'm not exactly a fan of, particularly with how long it's drawn out. But that's about it. Otherwise, the score and the little bit at the end with showing the skull inside of the pumpkin is fantastic. And then there's just the pitfall with this film of starting the whole familicide motivation that would go on to define the rest of the storylines in this franchise, at least until the new trilogy. Giving Michael motive, it took away the entire point of the original film. He was supposed to be walking chaos. You weren't supposed to know why he kills. You were only supposed to know that he's a killer. That one day as a kid he just snapped and killed his sister. Simple. But that aside, if I'm willing to put aside the whole motive thing just enough, because I think everything else in the film still holds up quite well, particularly with how they're able to keep the same sense of atmosphere and the building of the dread that the original did so well. And the hospital setting, as well as that group of characters, are a fun lot. Especially Bud, he's just freaking funny. And then Jimmy, I like quite a lot. I like how protective he is over Laurie. Although I do agree with what some fans have said with how, they mentioned a character named Ben Tramer in the original, so just make this guy Ben Tramer. That would have been a cool way to tie it together more. Fair enough, but as is, I think he's a cool character. And the kills, while you can tell that the reason they're upping the gore was because films like Friday the 13th and other horror films at the time were making bank while showing a lot of gore, I still feel that even though the gore is heightened in this, they're still able to keep the tension and the suspense, Especially that one scene where Michael comes slowly out of the darkness, like that scene in the original, and then he just stabs the nurse in the eye with the freaking needle. Stuff like that is great. And then you have Dr. Loomis's subplot, while you could argue it's just, putting him in the sidelines until, we really need him in the climax. Fair. But it's tied in just well enough. And you get to hear his epic speeches, and you even see Loomis fleshed out a bit more, which is how committed and willing he is to go after Michael, even possibly at the expense of his own life. As we see in the ending of the film, with how he supposedly, at least at that time, blew them both up. So, that's all well and good. While there's some, as I mentioned, there is some stuff with Halloween 2 that while it has diminished my liking of this film a little bit, it hasn't diminished it entirely. I still really like this film a lot. It remains one of my favorites of the franchise. And yeah, it's an easy, solid A at the best. So, it is here at number 7. And here is where the changes in my rankings start to rear their head. At number 6 is Halloween H2O 20 years later. Much like Halloween 2, H2O is another one of the ones that I absolutely loved watching the most when I was younger. There was even a time where I would call this like a literal, perfect, flawless film. And looking at it now, it certainly is not that, but there's still a lot to like here. Here we see Jamie Lee Curtis making her long-awaited return to the franchise after last appearing in Halloween 2. And here she has a very heavy emotional arc that ultimately culminates in her choosing not to hide anymore. She's gonna face her monster and save the people she loves. And it's a great arc that has a lot of payoff and build up throughout the whole 80 minutes. Not a single second is wasted with Laurie's character, and you really sympathize with her here. On the one hand, you get why she would keep her son so sheltered. You feel the trauma, you feel the fear that she's lived with for all those 20 years. And at the same time, the film does a good job of really getting you to sympathize with her son, John. You feel the want that he has for a more free, open life outside of this boarding school and away from her mother. You can tell that he loves her dearly and that he wants her to move on, but eventually, enough is enough and he can't take anymore. It's pushed just enough to where it doesn't become mean-spirited or that it makes him unlikable. So that's something the film does really well, is allowing you to see both sides of the situation and how both people feel about it. And outside of that, you have a fun set of characters here. My favorite of the bunch being Ronnie, played by the rapper LL Cool J. You could say that maybe his scenes are unimportant to the narrative, but you know what? He's cool, he's charming, he's likable, so I'll keep that in there. Now, some of the stuff that does hold this film back from being among the top spots, sadly, is that the kills, aside from the one with the little dumbwaiter thing smashing the chick's leg nearly clean off, that's a badass scene. The kills are otherwise pretty unimaginative. They're just stabs, slit throats, shootings, cut someone's head off. Which, okay, that ending is pretty kick-ass, but I digress. And then there's the ending. Now hear me out. The ending is fantastic with how it pays off all the build-up of Laurie finally choosing to not run or hide anymore. She's gonna face her brother head-on. One of them's dying tonight. And as great as all that is, with how it leads to her taking the body away so she can dispose of Michael herself, and then you have that little brother and sister moment that looks emotional and tender at first, but then she just cuts his fucking head off. She is done with his shit. That's all great. And you feel the emotional closure that she has. But then it just ends there. I've never been a fan of that in any horror film where it just literally cuts to credits as soon as they kill the monster or the person or whatever. With a story like this that's dealing with Laurie trying to find emotional closure, you needed a bit of afterward, like after that scene. She cuts his head off, but then like a few more minutes of what after. She gets back to the boarding school perhaps and gets back with her son and all that. They all embrace and all that. And again, you see more of her finally feeling like, I am free of this terror. Michael is gone for good. So it's something I unfortunately have to hold against the movie quite a bit. And once again, there's another film at my number 4 spot that rectifies this perfectly. Wink. But all that aside, make no mistake, Halloween H2O is a more than satisfying anniversary sequel that gets the job done, flaws aside, and is where the series could have easily ended. And even with how much I love this new trilogy, it is where it should have ended. Yeah. Thank you, Busta Rhymes. You're a delight. But nevertheless, This film is at number 6. And at number 5 is a movie that has jumped up a spot since my last ranking, and that is going to be Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. Now this is another one that I don't have nostalgia for. I saw it for the first time in 2018 when I finally was able to get access to all the other films on DVD, or more specifically Blu-ray, because I was able to buy the box set. And yeah, this has a legacy as one of the most well-regarded sequels in the franchise, and I completely, totally understand why. While on the surface it may look like it's just rehashing the original film, everything down from the fact that he escapes again, he's going to go after someone in his bloodline, he's going to go after a relative, and then Loomis goes to Haddonfield to inform the police. But what makes the film work is that it takes those ideas, those familiar ideas, but goes in different directions with them. Here in this film, we see the entire town go all lynch mob and start going after Michael Myers once word starts to get out that he's out there, that he's back. Because Michael is fucking smart in this movie. Holy shit. And he's at his most deadly too. He takes out the entire police force, save for Sheriff Meeker, and he takes out the power. And then he lays siege on Haddonfield. That's an intimidating villain. Then you have Jamie Lloyd, who is just one of the best characters in the entire franchise. They get you to sympathize with her right away when you see her bullied by those bastard kids at the school. I honestly wanted Michael to kill those kids, as fucking dark as that sounds, with murdering children. I'm just like, yeah, I'm someone who takes bullying of that involving that subject matter very personally. But then again, I assume a lot of people would. So, but yeah. But she's very empathetic, and she's just such a very sweet character. And the way that she's able to be so strong in the face of these bastard kids tormenting her at the thought of her uncle, but yet she goes out trick-or-treating to spite these kids. Like, that's cool. That's an awesome character. Then you have Rachel, who is one of the best final girls in horror, period. I love the relationship that her and Jamie have. It starts off rocky at first, but through this whole perilous situation with Michael Myers coming into their lives, it brings them together in a very heartwarming way. And the lengths that Rachel goes to protect her is just, yeah, I fell in love with this character right away. And then you have Dr. Loomis, of course, who is once again reprised by Donald Pleasance. And I don't know if it's a hot take, but I actually think that this is Loomis at his absolute best. You can tell that he's just, at this point, he's just a broken man who's just tired of it all, but he'll go through it no matter how many times, because he's just that kind of guy. He will die selflessly for a town full of people that hate him. Like, and it's all shown at that scene at the gas station when he's all, "You want another victim? Take me. But leave those people in peace." I've already been in love with Loomis's character in Halloween 1 and Halloween 2. But here is where it just cemented it to me. Like, yeah, this is, if not at the very least second best to Laurie Strode, the best character in the entire franchise. Loomis rocks. And talking about the tone and the atmosphere and even the kills for a minute, this is one of the scariest films in the entire franchise. I mean it. Like, Especially that whole chunk of the film where they're all locked up in the house, trying to keep themselves safe. The tension that builds is so bone-chillingly just, well, chilling. It's like, I can't even describe it. It is masterful, the amount of tension they were able to put into this film. It reaches the heights of the original film, in my opinion. And man, does this take me back to when I discussed this film on my live stream last year. And oh, how the hilarity ensued. Halloween 4.
Damn!
And then, of course, you have what I can now honestly say and agree with is the greatest Michael Myers kill in any movie. I don't even need to allude to it, drop any hints, or show a clip, because, let's be honest, y'all know what I'm talking about. So, need I say more? And then it's all capped off with an equally chilling ending with Jamie being corrupted by Michael's evil. And I mourn the fact, like a lot of fans do, I mourn the fact that future sequels never took this direction, with the idea of someone else being the killer. Though there is another film on this list that I've yet to talk about that does fully take advantage of that long cock tease of a plot point that this franchise has only minorly delved into in the past, so wink. But yeah, overall, I think that me and most Halloween fans would be in agreement. This film is the shit, and Halloween 5 is dog shit for how it undermines everything that Ford tried to say, so yeah. Alrighty, so with these top 4, by process of elimination, y'all know what's left. Now, while I've already mentioned that top 7 onward are all my favorites of the franchise, which they are, these next 4 onward reach another ungodly level of good that I rarely ever use to describe a movie. There's only a few select certain movies that I would use to describe as this level of good. So, and I also need to preface that in regards to what I'm about to say about the films of the David Gordon Green trilogy, I am going to be getting rather personal in some spots as far as how these films have had a rather huge personal, emotional impact on my life. And it does matter for why I'm going into why I love these movies so much. So keep that in mind when I'm about to go into what I do. So let's get the ball rolling. At number 4, let's get the controversy out of the way, because my number 4 is Halloween Ends. Now, just to get it out of the way, so y'all know where I'm coming from, I understand fully why this movie is not so well regarded with the majority of the fandom. The directions that it takes, how different, weird, and out there they are with the whole Corey Cunningham storyline, everything that's been complained about, I understand. Because as a Halloween fan, you want one thing, you expect one thing. You want Michael Myers front and center, slaying bitches left and right, and in this case, you want an entire movie of Michael Myers and Laurie whooping each other's ass. And you feel like you didn't get that, you were disappointed, I understand fully. I may not agree with the opinion, but I understand why someone would be pissed off. So keep that in mind when I'm about to say what I say about this movie. Now, going first into why I love the film from the lens of a Halloween fan is, I will admit this is certainly not what I would have wrote per se if it were up to me to write Halloween Ends. Like looking at where 2018 and Kills were going, how that plot line was progressing, and it were up to me to write the final film, this would not be what I would have written. Not even close, I will give you that. But what does it for me is the ways that it still ties into Laurie Strode's story. You have this character with Corey Cunningham who's had this bad stroke of luck after accidentally killing that kid he was babysitting, and as a result, he's ostracized by the rest of the town. He finds sympathy and compassion when he meets Laurie and then later Allison, and then those two form their little relationship. And what does it for me is that the ways that Laurie is starting to notice something off about Corey, you know, how she says, oh, I see the same eyes that I saw in Michael's eyes in Corey. And then seeing the encounter that Corey has with Michael Myers and that downward spiral that he starts to go down, becoming a new killer, part because of Michael Myers and also part because of the people in the town of Haddonfield that wronged him. And the ways that it ties into Laurie Strode's story, I think is fantastic. Because now Laurie not only has to stop Michael when he eventually comes back, she has to go up against Corey. And it's all because she wants to save Allison. She wants to save Allison. She does not want Allison to go down the same downward spiral of trauma, failure, and depression that had plagued Laurie's life for so many decades. If she can save Allison, she will, even if it comes at the cost of her own life. And it's in those unique ways that, while different, bold, even very weird and out there, but in a way, I still feel it's able to bring this entire storyline full circle. And nothing felt wasted narratively or with the characters. It just works for me. And this is why I held off this video with this ranking of all the films to this year, because I wanted this film to sit with me for a year and marinate. Because I loved it when it came out, but I wanted to give it some time to marinate with me. Like, does it work with me, or was I just coming off of the high of seeing a new Halloween film in the theater? And yeah, it honest to God works for me. So I'm able to appreciate it being something different while still giving me the things that I've wanted out of a Halloween finale, albeit in the ways that I didn't expect. Because at the end of the day, each film in this trilogy, each individually gave me something I have always wanted to see out of the Halloween franchise. And in the case of this film, one of the things I wanted and got fully was the idea of finally delving into the psyche of another person. What if they become a killer? And what if they're consumed by their own rage and evil and they just go on a downward spiral? All these ideas that were teased, especially in Halloween 4, but they didn't have the balls to go through with in later sequels. And here we finally have a character study of that sort. But that aside, here we also finally have an ending. Yes, H2O tried to deliver an ending. That was what they wanted. They didn't want to make the extra film with Resurrection, even though it was in their contract. But But going back to what I said earlier about H2O, with how even though the emotional closure there with Laurie is great, with how she chops his head off, I had an issue with, like I said, with the fact that it just cuts up right there and there's no narrative afterward there. Like, no other little scenes afterward. It just, she cuts his head off and end credits. But here, after the whole frickin' midnight procession with the whole town getting in on it, as they take Michael's corpse to the junkyard, throw him in the frickin' metal shredder, it's like, I kind of feel like maybe they listen to me. Wouldn't that be something? Maybe they watch my channel and they're like, you know what, let's give this guy what he wants. But all jokes aside, it's like, that's something that this film improves on over H2O, is that it doesn't just end as soon as Michael is dead. You get even if it's just a couple minutes, they use those couple minutes very well with showing what's happened afterward. We see that Allison is leaving Haddonfield to just form her own life. We see that Laurie finally has the closure that she has wanted for so many years. And you can feel that emotional weight. That feeling that she probably thought she'd never get to finally say, I killed the boogeyman. And I can, and just seeing how she's finally going to be able to live the rest of her life in peace. It was just very emotionally cathartic and satisfying to see, because it was totally them looking resurrection in the eye and telling that movie to go fuck itself. And I loved every second of it. Now, I've heard a lot of fans say that it would have been more satisfying for both Michael and Laurie to die together, like they take each other out. And I can see how that would have worked. Like, there's definitely a way they could have spun that in a positive way, showing that Laurie is giving her life to defeat Michael once and for all. And it would be bittersweet, knowing that she dies too, given everything that she's went through with all of her trauma and that downward spiral of failure and depression that she's went through for so many decades. But at the end of the day, what would really matter is that she went out on top as a hero to the eyes of Haddonfield, finally taking down the Shape. But as is, I'm glad that it still ended the way it did. Laurie defeated her boogeyman. She has that emotional catharsis. And it got me pretty emotional, because over the course of these 3 films, I was starting to really look up to at least this incarnation of Laurie Strode as like sort of a role model, like, because of some personal stuff in my life that I'm about to get into in a minute. But Laurie Strode was slowly become one of my heroes as far as characters in pop culture. Laurie Strode, I can now say, is one of my heroes. And again, as good as it could have been to spin it some way to where they both die, having it as is, where Laurie Strode not only defeats the boogeyman, but also gets to just live the rest of her life in peace, finally. You could tell that was cathartic for the character of Laurie Strode, while also cathartic for Jamie Lee Curtis, and in a way, it was definitely cathartic for me. So, I have no complaints about the way it ended. There was a lot of emotional investment that I was putting into this film because of, as I said earlier, what the 2018 film started with, the whole deep emotional impact it had on me, as well as just feeling satisfied as a fan of the franchise with how I felt everything was being redeemed. It got to the point that with the trailers, the marketing, and all the build-up for this movie, it was honest to God getting to the point that Halloween Ends was not only my most anticipated film of 2022, it was getting to the point that this was becoming the most anticipated film of my life. This was going to be the biggest movie event of my life. And I know that's a dangerous mindset to be in. But I was willing to put all the faith in the world that they were going to be able to stick the landing with how much that I, at least personally, was loving and digging where the previous two films were taking the storyline. And at least in my opinion, I think they pulled it off. So yeah, Halloween Ends, one of the best finales to a franchise I have ever seen in my life. And while I fully understand why at least the majority of the fan base didn't get into it for very understandable reasons, but yeah, it's a movie that I can play devil's advocate with at the end of the day. So like it or hate it, Halloween Ends sits at my number 4. In third place is gonna be Halloween Kills. Now this movie surely was like a wait and a half, wasn't it? It got pushed a year, and then as a result, it got overly marketed with a lot of spoilers in the trailers and the TV spots and stuff, but Halloween Kills for me honestly was the most excited I had ever been for a movie, at least up to this point, since X-Men Apocalypse in 2016. And I remember actually being pretty skeptical about it when this and also Halloween Ends were both initially announced in 2019. Because I remember being so angry. I thought it was going to be another H2O resurrection thing all over again. They were going to fuck it up. They had a good thing going in 2018 and all that. So I just thought it was going to be ruined all over again. But then I started hearing more details about what the film was going to be, with them bringing back other legacy characters to be alongside Laurie Strode. We were going to see the return of Tommy Doyle, Lindsay Wallace. We see the return of Tommy Doyle, Lindsay, Brackett, and we even get Marion Chambers and Lonnie Elam in here, which were some nice additions. And the plot details they were giving about how it was still going to be the same night, and that it was going to be more about the effects on the town as a whole, as well as the effects on that the night in 1978 had on all the other characters. I was like, that's actually a good idea. Because as much as I love 2018 for how it explores Laurie Strode's psyche and her state of mind 40 years later after these murders, one thing that I did start to notice over time that was missing from 2018 was, okay, well, what about Tommy, Brackett, and Lindsay? How have they been affected? How are their lives several decades later? And that's what Halloween Kills gave us. And that was the only ingredient I needed to say, okay, there's a reason for this film to exist. But then again, that's just all on paper. Let's wait and see how the film is in execution. And I think the execution was just as good. While not without its fair share of flaws, which I'll get into, but overall, I thought they explored the shared trauma of these other characters very well. Showing Tommy Doyle to have this hero complex because he's this broken man stuck in that one night 40 years ago and still has this obsession over Michael Myers. And then we finally address Brackett's need for revenge and the need for him to avenge his daughter Annie. And then of course you get Lindsay and Marion and Lonnie all thrown into the mix here, and I really like what they did with Lonnie. Taking this pretty much nothing, one scene character almost, and giving him a lot of layers. They humanizing him in ways that felt right, that felt like I can buy this being a thing. And I even didn't mind how Marion went out in this film. in my opinion, compared to her screen time in H2O, she has a lot more to do in this film, being a part of the angry mob that goes after Michael Myers. She gets dispatched and disposed of really quickly, but nevertheless, they gave her a bigger part to play in this film, in my opinion. So that was nice. And putting the whole evil dies tonight meme aside, I love the other thing that this film explores about mob mentality. It's the fact that it's not so much necessarily Michael himself destroying the town, it's the town destroying themselves through their own actions, through their need to have this mental groupthink, and as a result, they're getting themselves killed. So that's why Laurie in this movie says it's Michael's masterpiece. Because it shows that he's more than just this boogeyman who jumps out of a closet and stabs you. He's destroying a town through his actions, not just with a knife or with his bare hands. It's all psychological warfare. And it's deep, it's psychological, and I loved it. And plus, this was a very special theatrical experience for me because I got to see this movie with my sister, who in particular I had personally reconnected with a couple years prior, after we had been apart for so many years, adopted by different families. It's this whole thing for reasons that I am not comfortable enough to put out there publicly. But basically, some experiences we've shared in our pasts that it's another thing that, in this movie in particular, that I really connected with as far as guilt. Because there's stuff that happened to us that once I was told about it, I felt some personal sense of guilt over. Like I could have done something about what happened. So I feel like that this movie in particular brought me and my sister closer together than we had already had been, which we are really close. She is one of the most important relationships I have in my life, and I am really glad that we were able to reconnect and find each other again. So, but personal stuff aside, I think that overall the ends justify the means with this film. Bringing back all the legacy characters and the themes of mob mentality, as well as the increase in blood and gore while still being able to keep the same level of heart and thematic elements that were present in the 2018 film. I thought it all mixed together very well. Now, if I had to go into any negatives, which I am going to be fair, there are some. And for me, it's that, if anything, I feel like they killed off too many of the legacy characters. Because you still have one more film to go after this with Halloween Ends. And by the end of it, yeah, I think they killed way too many of them. Certain characters in particular, like Tommy and Brackett, that I feel like could have really had some emotional story arcs serviced for them had they carried on into Halloween Ends. But nevertheless, even though they are killed in this film, I feel like they go out on memorable enough notes, especially Tommy, with the moment that he has when he's stabbed by the shape. They give him that moment like, oh shit, I fucked up, and now I'm staring face to face, eye to eye with the boogeyman. So at the end of the day, the boogeyman got Tommy, and it hurt to see. It hurt to see Brackett die. It hurt to see Marion die. Like, all the legacy characters that were killed in this, it hurt seeing them die. It did leave an impact on me. So while it hurts to see, that still shows that the movie is doing something right. 'Cause at the end of the day, while you could argue that it is another instance of stupid characters making stupid decisions, I argue that it's more or less like an intentional theme for the film. That people will resort to very irrational, stupid behavior just to protect the people they love. And in the face of death, people will do stupid things. And I think that's another thing that's explored really well in this film. So yeah, aside from the one thing with how many legacy characters are killed, I pretty much have no complaints with Halloween Kills. It's a film that pretty much shouldn't have worked given how 2018 ended, but they're able to make it work so damn well. So, for me personally, I think they overall justified the film's existence. So at the end of the day, that is my biggest praise for this film in context of how each film in this trilogy individually gave me something I've always wanted from the franchise. And in this case, with Halloween Kills, I finally got all the OG characters from the original film banding together to go after Michael Myers. Because in various other sequels, we've had Tommy in one sequel, we've had Brackett in another. But the storyline that I've always wanted to see, with everybody from the original film coming together, this film gave me that, and I couldn't be happier. I absolutely love it. And yeah, so overall, it does fit among the best of the series at number 3. Oh boy, time for me to get in trouble again. Because my runner-up, number 2, is going to be the one, the only, the classic, John Carpenter's Halloween. Oh man, I'm never gonna live it down though. From last year's stream, when I oh so controversially ranked this film as, well, oh boy, number 3. No! Hear me out. Get the fuck out. I will admit, at that time, that was just me, just high off of the hype that I've had for this original trilogy, and that I ranked 2 films in that trilogy above the original film. Sue me. But, seeing as how I've had time to let my thoughts on Halloween Ends and this trilogy as a whole marinate, my thoughts have evened out overall, and because of the issues that I've grown to have with Halloween Kills, have put that film at number 3. So here we are. So what else can be said about John Carpenter's magnum opus? Like, really. I've discussed it on my channel before. Everyone and their mother has discussed it. So what can I bring to the table that is new and insightful about this movie? Nothing. But I'm going to say some stuff anyway. What works so brilliantly about this film is the way that John Carpenter was able to take the most simple concept in the world. You got some babysitters, they're babysitting some kids on Halloween night, they're on their own, and then a serial killer comes and attacks them. And one of the girls has to rise up to protect the children. So, and then of course you have Loomis's plot line with trying to warn the police, and that's all weaved in there. But that's the brilliance of this film is, I've mentioned it before, and so many people have said it before, but it bears repeating, excellence through simplicity. Just because it's the most simple concept in the world does not mean that through execution you cannot make something so insightful, suspenseful, and just freaking bone-chillingly tension-filled as this movie is, and it's a damn near flawless film. The only, I guess, nitpick being the dialogue with Laurie and her friends like in the middle of the film, but that's whatever, that's how they talked back in the day. So it's whatever with me. So it's not like something actually bad about the film. But other than that, there is no fat in this film that needs to be trimmed. And the pacing is excellent. All the characters leave an impact, big or small. And yeah, in one film alone, Michael Myers proved himself to be one of, if not the most, iconic figure in horror history. So, yeah, like I said, what else can there be said without dragging this out? So, I just gave y'all the basics. Because that's what this film does. It gives you the basics, and it executes it brilliantly. So, it may only be number 2, but the fact still stands. It is forever going to be my favorite horror film of all time. But coming in first place, controversial as it may be, is Halloween 2018. Or as I and many fans have come to call it, Halloween Returns. Now let me explain myself before everyone in the comment section kills me. Even though it's number 1, Halloween 2018 is my favorite film of the series. But make no mistake, I still fully acknowledge and respect the fact that by every aspect in terms of legacy and the craftsmanship that went into making it, at every aspect that John Carpenter's Halloween is still the best film in the series. No contest, that's never going to be disputed. So, I just want to put that out there. Now, I've been hinting at other points in this video that this entire trilogy, the David Gordon Green trilogy, has had a huge, major, deeply emotional impact on my life. And I am going to get into that, and I'm going to get into why here in a second. But just going into the film itself, why the film itself, I think, is so great. This is just a very special film to me. Going right into it in context of how each film in this trilogy gave me something I've always wanted from the franchise. This film just plain and simply went back to the original. It ignored everything in favor of going back to the roots of the original film, with Michael Myers finally being the motiveless killer that he was supposed to be from the very beginning. What he was in the original film, and they went back to that. But not just that, by just simply ignoring all the horse shit that was dealt our way with Halloween 5, 6, and Resurrection especially, and for some people the Rob Zombie films also. It was just very special to see this back-to-basics approach given to us by people that honestly, genuinely understand the franchise. This isn't just a paycheck to them. And while this huge, massive retcon does render a lot of the good films in the series obsolete, like the original Halloween 2, Halloween 4, and H2O, I feel like the ends justify the means here. Because at the end of the day, the whole point was going back to the point that John Carpenter wanted to make in the original film, with the lack of motive and just wiping the slate clean of all that messy ass mythology, because none of it was worth a damn, especially something like Halloween 6. Get that shit the hell out of here. So what we have here is a more psychological, emotional story that digs deep into the effects of trauma, generational trauma, how it passes down from one person to the next. And we see how deeply it has affected Laurie Strode for these past 40 years. And it is heartbreaking to see 2 failed marriages, estranged from her family, At this point in her life, she has long since been on a downward spiral of depression and failure. And this all just, it hit me in such an emotional way that I was never expecting it to. Now, kind of getting a little personal here for a minute or two about why this trilogy as a whole has had a deep emotional, personal effect on my life. You could say in a way that these movies saved my life. I am very willing to say, because so you kind of get what I'm saying. If you knew me as a person when I was a kid, you would not have liked me. I was an awful, horrid kid. I would lie, I would steal, I would emotionally manipulate and control people, or even throw people under the bus. I was awful. I had a long journey of not emotional, but just a long journey of self-discovery that I had to go through when we moved here to our new place where we live at around 5 or 6 years ago. And aside from just trying to come to gripes with where we live now, and get over that homesickness. But yeah, I had to take a lot of steps to change as a person. And one of those steps was eventually going back into school. I'm one of those people that went into high school late in my life. Like, I went into school at a late age, so I didn't graduate until I was like maybe 20 or so. It was a long but worth it journey that I feel bettered me as a person. But going back to what I said earlier about how I feel like these movies saved my life is there was a point in my life where I was starting to just feel like it was going nowhere, and that I was just a disappointment to everyone around me. I felt like such a failure as a person. And I was so close to making a mistake that I, wouldn't have lived to regret if I had actually went through with it, is the safe YouTube guidelines way of saying it. But then 2018 came around, and when that film came out, and, that film had Laurie Strode's whole storyline of, this whole descent of failure and trauma and depression and all that. And it cut a deep chord with me. Like, I saw a lot of myself in this interpretation of Laurie Strode. Like, obviously not like the trauma or anything, but this sense of failure and all that. But seeing her, how she rose through it, and she defeats Michael, she gains the love of her family again, and they hinted the fact that afterwards she's going to be on the road to bettering herself as a person. So it cut such a deep impact with me, and it left me to really self-reflect and left me to realize deep down all the hearts that I would have been breaking if I had chose to do what I was thinking of doing. But yeah, it's not a story that I feel is very easy to put out there. But I feel it is worth noting in context to why I loved this particular trilogy of films so much. So, yeah. But going back to what else works so perfectly about the movie is Michael Myers. We mentioned earlier that they go back to the original idea of him being motiveless evil, walking chaos. He is the shape, the boogeyman. We don't know why he kills, and we don't need to know why. He's scarier that way, and this movie shows. Michael Myers in this film is the most intimidating and interesting that he has been since the original movie. The way that he moves and the kills, especially the way that they're able to mix showing the gore as well as doing that technique I love in horror films where it shows the aftermath, so it leaves you to think about what could have possibly went down there. Like, what the fuck are we dealing with here? As a YouTuber Dave McRae would say. So, yeah, no complaints about Michael Myers in this film whatsoever. Not even with Dr. Sartain and that little twist that comes halfway through the movie. That's a twist that bothered a lot of Halloween fans, and I can get why to an extent. I mean, it is weird and all, what the fuck. But why it works for me is because of the resolution. Because I hear a lot of fans say that they're like, okay, maybe this could have been interesting, but they do nothing with it. In a way, they actually do something with it. In a way that services Michael's character in all of the right ways, if you really think about it. Because we've had all the complaints before about, like, the Cult of Thorn in the producer's cut of Halloween 6, controlling Michael, and so all the mystique and the intimidation he's ever had is just gone. Would you have really wanted to see Dr. Sartain doing something like that? Like sending Michael away like a lapdog after Laurie, like, get her, Michael, go get her. Is that really what you would have wanted? So that's why I like the way that it resolves itself, is that Michael just fucking kills him. It adds to and supports the fact that he is now motiveless evil again. All the other stuff in the sequels, that doesn't matter. So, in a way, it actually does do something with Michael Myers. So, that's just something, that's an interesting angle that, I mean, it took me a while to think of it that way, but now that I do think about it, it's one of the best parts of the movie to me. So, that's another thing I have, that at least I now have no complaints about. Now going into some stuff that doesn't work, admittedly, is just, there's admittedly too much time spent on Allison's little friend group that she has in this film. It's not so much like actually a negative, more a nitpick for me, because I actually do like most of these characters. Vicky especially, she's just a badass with the little screen time she has. And the kid she's babysitting, Julian, is funny as shit. Like, holy shit, like man, is this kid funny. Even if some of his jokes cut through the tension, which you could have cut out of the film and lost nothing. Another thing that I love so much about this film is the way that they're able to carefully weave in a character like Frank Hawkins and retroactively say that he was someone that was around during the events of 1978, and they're able to make it work. And that's another complaint fans had, where we don't see a flashback right away, you know, we didn't get that until kills. But I actually like that it's done this way. Like, they plant the seeds for his character and his backstory in a way that's able to leave you asking the right questions. Like, oh, that's interesting. Like, he's the one that arrested Michael. Like I wonder how that went down. So like it sets up a mystery that eventually we get answers to in Halloween Kills with that awesome flashback. So it's just little details as well as the big picture stuff in this film that I think all work hand in hand to deliver the best sequel the franchise has ever had. And all of this culminates in the third act with not only a very badass fight between Michael and Laurie, which then eventually involves her daughter Karen and her granddaughter Allison, and they all team up to kick his ass. You then have that awesome and even sort of emotional ending with how they think they have him locked up. And then they're able to leave the blazing inferno safely in the back of that truck, and you get that one gorgeous panning shot of the house on fire with the emotional version of the Halloween theme going. Oh, it tugged at my heartstrings. Now, while it did come at the cost of good movies, like I mentioned before, like Halloween 2, Halloween 4, and so on, at the end of the day, it's worth noting that it's like, those are still movies that exist. You can watch them. Now, while this trilogy connected to the original film, these 4 movies are what's canon, you can ultimately build your own headcanon. And hell, for the longest time, my headcanon was Halloween 1, Halloween 2, H2O, and Resurrection does not exist. And that still would have been my headcanon if they had shit the bed at any point with this new trilogy. And at the end of the day, that's just another reason why these 4 films I have ranked at the top. It's not just because they're actually what's canon, that's what they say is the official canon. It earned my praise and it being my preferred canon because this is the only Halloween timeline where nothing about any of the films pissed me off. You think about it. You have Halloween 1, 2, and 4, which are great. You got good momentum going there. But then 5 and 6 ruin it. So there's that timeline ruined, which could have been a potentially good continuity. Then, as we just mentioned, you have Halloween 1, 2, H2O. That's a good trilogy right there. You could have ended it right there. But nope, they had to make Resurrection. So there's that continuity ruined. That's obviously not by any fault of H2O as a film. That was just because they were greedy and they wanted more money. But I digress. But with this timeline though, the original Halloween, then Halloween 2018, Halloween Kills, and Halloween Ends, it is the first timeline where I liked every single film in the continuity. I cared about the characters. I consistently, genuinely cared about what was going on. I liked the way the story was progressing, and I was satisfied with how it ended. And that's just a testament to this continuity of films in general, as well as pretty much all the films in the series that I do like. But especially this new trilogy in particular, like, who would have imagined that a franchise known mainly for the horror, the slashing, and the gore could end up having a deeper, more emotional weight and emotional depth to it beyond just the slashing and the killing. But that's just a testament to good writing. And now, especially with the recent news coming out about Miramax acquiring the TV rights to the franchise, which pretty much more than confirms that any future installment in the franchise going forward will not be connected to this timeline here. That just makes me happier and just makes me satisfied with this timeline more. So, at the end of the day, what is and isn't canon within Halloween is always going to be within the eye of the beholder. What ultimately matters is which ones you love. You can make up your own headcanon. You can say whatever you want about what's canon, what isn't, what matters in the continuity to you, and that's all that matters. 'Cause that, like any franchise ever, is the brilliant thing about fandom. And that is it, ladies and gentlemen. My long-ass Halloween ranking. All 13 films, ranked from worst to best. And what is no doubt the longest, biggest video I have done to the channel up to this point. Like, I have no idea, like, how long the final cut of this video is going to be once I get it out there. But I'm assuming it's going to be, like, maybe close to 2 hours, which I know is insane. Like, I was delving deep into almost all of these movies, man. But, I tried to keep it focused and talk about what was important instead of straying off into a bunch of unnecessary stuff. So, long as the video may be, I hope y'all enjoyed it. I hope this was a nice gift for you guys, the subscribers, because this was made with the labor of love. As much as as awkward as I may come off with all the times that I stutter and all that, as long as you guys are entertained, that's all that matters to me. Because that's my passion, is reviewing movies and hoping that people are entertained by what I have to say. So with that being said, comment down below tastefully how you would rank all the Halloween films from worst to best, and keep it civil, because I know that Halloween, much like Star Wars, or I guess like a lot of the big franchises, is a franchise that can incite a lot of deep, contentious discussions that can get toxic very quick. Not that I label all my subscribers as toxic, certainly not. But you get what I mean, and you probably know firsthand also how franchise conversations can go if things get ugly. So, once again, comment down below how you would rank all the films from worst to best. And in the meantime, whenever, I will see y'all next time with another review or another ranking or whatever I have planned. So, thank you all for watching and have a very happy Halloween.